Hey guys, so here in this video, I wanted to give you a little bit of a training update with how things are going, an update like how last block's going, changes to programming, work updates, etc. So first off, I just finished up my last block this past week. My coach and I basically added in some singles because we kind of figured out that I need a little more intensity exposure in order to sort of peak a little bit more. And my whole sort of philosophy with programming has shifted a little bit, where I kind of like adding in more singles more frequently for my lifters throughout the year, especially as they get to be a little bit more advanced. I think that there's a lot of unique benefits to singles, and that as long as the lifter can tolerate them and they know how to approach them, there's a lot of benefit to that, as it is essentially the sport of powerlifting. I have a podcast with Eric Helms where we talk a little bit more about how he likes to periodize them. There's also like Steve Novi has some videos on like fatigue singles. But yeah, right now, basically, the last block, I worked up to a 540 squat at RPE 9, which was a big PR for me, especially with how I was feeling coming into that day. Felt really, really beat up. This last block, I was doing a lot of overall work with the high intensity, and so I felt pretty crummy towards the end of this block. But still managed to squeeze out some big PRs. This is actually 470, 444, which I'm honestly happier about than that top single, because this was like harder. Like anybody who knows, like after a pretty heavy single, like that first down set tends to be pretty tough, but spots are moving along. One thing I have noticed is that with my inzers, because they're super compressive and tight, I have some issues with hitting depth more frequently on them. So I have to sink down a lot lower than I might think I have to. So I'm really only going to be using my inserts on my top sets going forward and really over sinking them. To just help with that problems. And my SBDs, I could always hit depth well on, no issues. I basically go until I hit a stretch to my glutes, and then I go back up. And like with inserts, like if the weight isn't heavy enough, I don't feel that stretch. I don't like get down low enough because the weight just doesn't push me down enough. I'm also pretty light, so that's also a factor. But I also hit a 700-pound conventional deadlift, which like was fine. I messed up with my positioning. I was just not very assertive and confident with how I was going down, grabbing the bar. Really, when you're deadlifting, you don't want to mess around at the bar. You kind of just want to brace and grab the bar and just kind of go. And you kind of spend shifting around at the bottom is sort of making you lose position. Also comes from like a lot of anxiety about the rep, and like that's sort of still how I feel about 700. Because I've only lifted that weight like freaking 5 times in my life, and so it still is a little bit intimidating to me. But still moved it well. Like I think like I probably had like 711 on that day, which is cool. Basically I could tie a meet PR with a lot of fatigue and training. But then I did safety bar squats are back in once a week too. I found that I just respond better to variation in general on really all lifts. SSB and comp squat seem to be my formula. Sumo and conventional deadlift, which I'll get to, seem to be my formula as well. And then with bench press, just really this past block I was doing, for the past few ones, I've been like kind of like, well, I feel kind of like beat up a lot of the time. Bench doesn't really feel very strong. And my coach and I were pushing intensity a lot more and doing less volume with less free frequency. So like just like lower reps on average, lots of singles. And I really just slowly got weaker over time, and things just felt heavy. I always felt pretty beat up. Also, with just training on a competition pad and trying to get all the volume that I need on, it's really hard on my chest and on my shoulders. So going forward, I'm really going to be using the competition fat pad for most of my bench training, with the exception of my primary days being on the comp pad, because I can tolerate more training stress, more training volume, and can just get overall more recoverable workload in, as well as mostly doing higher reps on my bench press. I'll show you guys my program at the very end of this. But that's where I respond best to on bench press. When I made my best bench progress, it was a lot of higher reps within the 6 to 10 rep range. And that's just my unfortunate response to training. I have to sort of pump volume to see improvements. But already like seeing, noticeable improvements. You guys will see later on the video, like, I hit like 300 for 4, very, very comfortably, like a 5 to 6 RPE. But deadlift right now, I'm actually going back to training both sumo and conventional, mainly for the reason that sumo is more recoverable for me in general. Like conventional, I always feel pretty crummy for a pretty extended amount of time. Like I will feel a ton of back fatigue and just fatigue in general going into my Friday safety bar squat session and secondary deadlift session. Like it just totally tanks me. I feel like pretty crummy. And also I think that in general, I might be able to have a slightly higher top end on sumo deadlift, especially the fact that I use a deadlift bar. Because the force curve on a sumo deadlift is where it's really hard off the floor, but it's quite easy towards lockout as long as you get the weight moving. And with the deadlift bar, it bends and basically bypasses a lot of that initial portion of the lift and makes the easiest part of the lift like just easier. You have less range of motion to move through. Whereas with the conventional deadlift, I don't think you get as much of a boost from a deadlift bar because it does bend more, it does reduce the range of motion, but the force curve on a conventional deadlift is that it's hardest right around your knees, and that's really not what you feel like a deadlift bar. It's kind of like what you start lift like in the hardest spot. Like in general, like as a rule of thumb, like I think you can probably get like 3% more using a deadlift bar if you know how to use it right, full slack on a conventional, and then probably 5% on like a sumo. But that's sort of what I'm going to see. Start off with like 683 at RPE 8 you guys saw, and then my down sets at sub 5. Again, higher reps, that's why my deadlift responds best to. In general, like I just respond a lot, like really well to volume. I think that has to do with like my background of bodybuilding mostly. It could also just be the fact that like that's the loading zone I respond best to. So if you think about it, we're modifying repetitions, that modifies the weight used and the percentage of the 1 rep max that you typically train in. So I think that I'm just, for whatever reason, that's just what I respond best to. I went through my program for the past like 2 years of working like with my coach and looked at well, what was my best blocks, like what did I respond best to on what days, and that was really just the days I was doing lots of volume in general. Now I've lowered down my accessory work just a little bit. Basically, I've been doing about like 100 weekly sets of volume in total, which is a good amount of work. But like I was doing like a lot more in the past, like more towards 120, which is like that's like a 20% increase. And I was having a lot of recovery issues. I just always felt pretty beat up in training, so lowering that down. In general, I found that about 10 to 15 sets per week for like just hypertrophy purposes tend to be about the sweet spot for most lifters. That's for sure why I put a lot of people in their total workload, with the exception of bench press. Bench press seems to just be one of those lifts where it just might need a lot of volume. Like I'm currently doing 22 sets per week right now on my bench press, but you guys will see like my weekly layout and what I'm doing. But yeah, overall, like been maintaining around like 193, like 194 for about the past 3 weeks, and so I'm making another adjustment upwards, about 200, 300 calories upwards, and then hopefully I'll push up to like 197. I tend to gain weight in chunks, like 2 or 3 pound chunks, and just maintain for about a month or 6 weeks. So that's sort of what happened to me this last bulk and this last phase. So still moving up the weight class slowly, putting on some poly tissue, and I think sumo is even going to feel much better once I have a bit more leg mass. So I'll show you guys a little bit of my program in this next clip. Okay, so this is my current program. So basically, I'm actually, like I told you in other videos, I train 7 days a week. So I basically just distribute all this volume over 7 days. That's why some of my sessions might look like they're just kind of shorter, because like when you're training as frequently as I am, you can't really do a ton of volume on each day. Like this is my most heavy volume day is my day 4, but really you can see lots more high reps, just addition of singles, sort of like my current bench layout. The notes right here is basically like ascending sets. Same with like this one, and then this one. Just I use this ascending sets because I tend to recover a little bit better from them. Helps me also just not overshoot my RPE on my secondary days, especially because like on bench press I have a little tendency to like overshoot, and then just like on my secondary days on squat and deadlift helps me like more so accurately gauge where my actual fitness levels are on the days how strong I am, so then I don't overshoot things. But in general, if you look at my overall volume, this is like basically the volume I'm doing for each muscle group. So, pretty moderate volume from everything except for really chest, just bench. But in my personal experience, I've seen this is what works the best. Higher volume programs do work, but it's generally going to be at the expense of risking injury and then not really seeing that much better progress, because like for me, it's never really been a volume issue. And for most people, isn't a volume issue. It's basically effort and or enough food to really grow. Because I'm so lean right now, like I just need to be in surplus to actually gain more muscle mass. And because with most powerlifting competitions, kind of like a game of like how muscular are you, because you could probably take a DEXA scan of all the competitors at a meet and say, okay, who has the most lean body mass in the weight class, and then probably going to be the person that wins. And so somebody who's like 5'6" in like the 82.5 kilo class, you know, is going to have more lean body mass than me just because I'm taller, more muscle mass. So that's why long term, like 220 has to be like the goal. And because I do 24-hour weigh-ins, like filling out the weight class means being 5% above the weight class to make that diet, to make that cut down to weight. So this is the overall program. Just to thought you guys would show. If you guys have any questions, just ask down below. If you guys are interested in coaching or programming, to really just get strong aesthetic in 90 days, really help you overcome any training plateau that you're dealing with, achieve your genetic potential with strength and muscle, and look aesthetic as hell on the platform in just 90 days. If you guys are interested, links down below to apply. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.